your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul.
So this was Rev. David Zeller singing Return Again. So here I am with my beloved Claudia. That Claudia is like a extended daughter type of thing. It's important for the record. Susie Kreiman, that we are remembering today, was the person who taught me Hebrew in the Hebrew school. She was my first Hebrew teacher, and Angel was a leader in the camp, and then I became a constant visit to Chile to help Angel when he was the only rabbi left in Chile. So I remember when this was born, a few anecdotes of her childhood, and I don't need to tell them, yes, and teenage, and our lives got intertwined and connected an extended family. So this is 24 years later, that tragic moment of July 18, 94. So Claudia, why don't we start from the beginning? What do we remember that day? What happened? I ask you to speak as close to the mic as you can.
So first of all, it's very meaningful to be with you in this day. And I was thinking today is July 17, so it's the day before. And I was thinking that July 17, 24 years ago, around this time, the end of the day, was last time I saw my mom. It was the end of the fast of Tisha B'Av, of the 9th day of Av. And we had a meal together, and then we went to sleep. And in the morning, the next day, July 18, she left for work early before I woke up. It was my winter break from university, so I slept late, so I didn't see her that morning. So before going to July 18, I wanted to stay in July 17, 94 for a minute and remember my mom alive. Because what I've noticed is that, unfortunately, because of the way she died, a lot of memories about her are about her death and less about her life. So I was just trying to remember while we were listening to the song that July 17 was a day that we spent together. I actually had a little fight with her. I was almost 20 years old, teenager. But she was still alive. So that morning, July 18, because it was a winter break, I was home. Both of my sisters were home, including my sister, Marianela, who lived in Chile at that time. Also my sister Marcelo, who lived in Argentina with us. And the phone rang a few minutes before 10 a.m. And a friend of mine who lived just a few blocks from the AMIA building, the center of the Jewish community, where the bombing happened at 9:54 a.m. that day, July 18, Monday. This friend heard the blast. Based on what I remember, she opened her door, saw the explosion, and the first thing she did, she called me. So the first words I heard were in Spanish, volaron la AMIA, which I don't know exactly how to translate. They
bombed the AMIA.
They bombed the AMIA. Which still I hear the voice of this friend, and I remember not knowing what those words mean, what they meant. It was like, what do you mean with that? Turn on the TV, phone calls started to come. My uncle, my family, everybody calling, asking, Mom didn't go to work today, right? Mom didn't go to work today, right? We called Dad to his work at the seminario. He couldn't answer the phone. He was on the phone trying to figure out what happened. And just a few minutes after, a friend of the family called and she said, I'm picking you up. I'll drive you to the AMIA. And she picked us up and took the three of us in a taxi as close as we could get to the AMIA building. Streets were closed, ambulances and fire trucks and police and thousands of people coming and going. It was chaos. Eventually we found my dad there and other friends and rabbi friends and family friends. And they sent the families to another building where the Jewish community had a school close by. And they let us in, and that's where we, the family, spent over a week waiting. That first day, the hope was very high. I remember going to hospitals close by to see if my mom was in one of the hospitals, and people just coming with list of names and telling where they were. And during that day, my mom's name never came. And we lived in that building in the school, the street of Ayacucho, for a week. You arrived there a couple of days later, or that same day. The sense of time is not. And we spent there with loving family and friends. Family from Israel arrived. Everybody arrived to be with us. And I recall that week as one of the most painful, or the most painful week of my life. I also recall it as a week of a lot of embrace and love, and people around and people being close to us. Seeing the community feeding us, helping us go to sleep, taking us, dressing us, like really taking care of us fully. It took a week, to find my mother's body. The bombing was on Monday, July 18, and only the next Sunday, July 24th, 25th, they found her. And it was a whole week of many families, all the families finding out about it. The next day, a week later, was the funeral of my mom. And then we started Shiva, the 7 days of mourning, and it was because we had spent a week waiting, then it was a very long period of painful experience. I would say that I remember just the day before her funeral, just probably a few hours before she was found, I remember a very strong sense that I wanted to do something, that I couldn't stay still anymore. They were not letting family members, of course, volunteer in the rubbles. There were many people volunteering. And I kept asking if there's anything I could do, and of course there was not much I could do. I went to the hospital to visit a colleague of my mother who was doing okay, and he's still doing okay, thank God. And I visited him, and I remember the joy I felt that this friend of my mom made it, and also the pain I felt knowing that probably my mother had not made it. But I remember very strongly that feeling of I couldn't sit still anymore. And the next day, or that evening, things kind of fell into another place of deep sadness and suffering. And I can't believe it's 24 years. In one hand, it looks so long ago. I was almost 20 years old. Now I'm almost 44 years old. More than half of my life I've lived without my mother. and she was 48 years old, which is the age of my sister almost, and soon will be. It's my generation, my time of life. It's when my mom stopped living.
I remember Claudia talking about the book of Psalms that your mom had with her. And I remember talking about that with you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So my mom was a very religious person. She read her Psalms or Tehillim every day. My sister Marcelo has the book of Psalms that she carried in her bag. They found her bag. I have her Siddur, her book of prayer. And it was, my mom had a deep connection with God and with her soul and with her religious life, and I think that was a model. During that week of waiting, my dad was spend a lot of time praying. That was a little hard for me because I wanted to find my mom, but each of us was finding our ways to cope. And I think prayer was very deep to my mom's experience, and I think she passed that to the three of us.
Also remember talking about the fact that she didn't need to go to the office that day, but she felt that she had to go because there were undocumented people waiting for her.
Yeah. I don't know if she didn't have to. What I know is that she was so committed to her work.
Tell us about her work.
She was the director of the, what we call it?
Social services?
Social services of the Jewish community in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. And her main job was to help people find jobs. And she always had her office filled with people. And she was very committed to help people to find sustainable jobs that they could make a living. My dad used to tell us that he called her a few minutes earlier to make plans for later that day because my sister was visiting, and she said she was too busy. She had a long line of people waiting.
And these people were from where?
I think from all over.
But very Bolivians, I believe, not the people from Bolivia.
Yeah.
People from
I think
Paraguay.
Yeah. I also recall very much many times, Mommy, let's call her, coming back from work really hungry, like just going to the refrigerator to eat something, and kind of like you didn't eat all day, but you took lunch with you. And she would say that many times some of her clients will come to her office so hungry that she, before helping them to find a job, she would feed them with her lunch because that's what she had. And the sense of frustration that she had, that she couldn't do more for them. Her office, they said, was full when the bombing happened.
So, Claudia, you, Marcela, Marianela, your sisters, your dad, Alava Shalom also, were victims of a terrorist attack. It's completely different from having a parent who died because he's sick or had an accident. This was a criminal act. It was a deliberate act to kill people. And 85 people were killed. So, can you share a little bit about the mourning process when you are dealing with a crime, in this case, and a hatred, a crime of hatred. What did you go through, and where are you now?
So, I would say that at the beginning, the confusion was what most defined my life in a lot of sense. But interestingly enough, and at least it's an articulation I can make now from what I remember, I don't know if I was able to articulate any of this 24 years ago. From the beginning, I never asked the question, why they did this to us, why this happened to me. For some reason, those questions did not, they appeared, but they did not define my experience. They didn't define the way I continue moving, like, in the world. I think that in a way, feeling so contained by community, feeling a lot of comfort in the Jewish practice, helped me in a way that allowed me to look forward instead of go to places of hatred or desperation. It does not mean that there were many moments where I felt desperation, where I felt angry, where I felt depressed, where the pain took over. But I think in general, what defined me or helped me through the whole, from the beginning, was a way of like, okay, what's now? And there are two experiences that really I hold very close with me from the week after the Shiva. One was that the last day of the Shiva, so traditionally when the morning ends, you go for a walk around the corner of your house, and then you can go out. That day there was a wedding of dear friends and students of my parents, Rabbi Gustavo, Kraselnik and Guti. And it was very hard that their wedding was on that day. And we went just for a little bit, just for the chuppah, and they allow us to, they did the beginning of the party without much music, so we could be there, and then we left. And I remember how profound it felt to walk from the deepest moment of pain to the celebration of love and life. I remember that moment very vividly. I remember the feeling very vividly. Like, why are we here? And then, we are here because there is no other option but to be here. And then that together with trying to figure out going back to life, to my commitments, my job, my university learnings, all the stuff that I was doing, very busy life was then, like now, that has not changed. And my professors and my bosses and everybody calling me and saying, take your time, take the semester, don't worry about it. And one phone call from who was my boss from the Talmud Torah from the Hebrew school program for Bar Bat Mitzvah students at the Bethel synagogue, where my parents were, where you were, where we come from. And Rabbi Sandra Kochman, who was my boss, called me and said, Claudia, don't worry, take your time, we'll find a sub for you. I was teaching 6th and 7th graders there. And I said to her, no, Sandra, I want to go back. She said, are you sure? I said, this is the only thing I really want to go back. And it felt very important to me, because that was the place where my mom started her Jewish and education journey. That she founded that school. She was the first teacher. She was really, and I was so blessed to be back in the place that my parents have met each other, and the place that has been an inspiration for them, and the values that they have taught me. They all started there with their teacher, Rabbi Marcelo, and I didn't want to give up that. I went to that class to teach. It was a disaster because the kids knew what happened. It was Argentinian kids. I cried for like the whole time. But I said, I want to be here. And I stayed there. And that's the only thing that I went back right away, in commitment of what I was going to do with my life. And I think that helped me define the journey that I was going to take. That was not going to be a journey of hatred, of a response that means, of a negativity. Again, I don't want to paint this as being easy and positive and optimistic, because it's not. And there's many, many moments where I am in despair and I lose hope. But I find a lot of inspiration. Both of my parents and my father passed away a few years ago. Of what they gave us is so valuable, and the fact that my mother was killed in a terrorist attack is the pain and the suffering helps me move on into think what I can do, so there is a little bit less of that pain and that suffering in the world. So my own experience of pain helps me think about how can I maybe with my work, with what I'm doing in the world, diminish a little bit of the pain and suffering for others in the world.
So let's stay for a moment there, because that's a very powerful even teaching before Tisha B'Av. For those who don't know, this Saturday night and Sunday we commemorate Tisha B'Av, that it's a holiday where we commemorate the destruction of the two temples of Jerusalem and many tragedies that happened in the Jewish people. So I want to stay for a moment, Claudia. I mean, this is one of the most powerful pogroms. This was against the Jews. People were killed because they were Jewish, or because they were in a Jewish building by anti-Semites. So there is a big difference between being a victim. So you are a victim that doesn't want to victimize herself. So there is a big point there, and many people, without the tragedy that you're talking about, in the narrative for life, they portray themselves as victims, and many times for justified reasons, others because of plain neurosis. So I'm interested in your personal journey as a spiritual person. To be being a big victim, but not allowing yourself to victimize yourself. Meaning not to be defined by that, not to be defined your feelings, your neshama, your soul. So what is, if you could have a teaching about that, what is the, because it's like you are in a fork, and the road could go, okay, I'm a victim, so I'm going to victimize myself, meaning I could justify many things in my life using this narrative that I'm a victim. Or there's another way of saying, yes, I'm a victim of a terrorist attack, but I'm not going to victimize myself. So what is it that allowed you to take one road and not the other?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I think that I found some kind of strength within myself, my relationship with God, I don't know what it is, that I think prayer, I think I'm thinking as I'm answering.
Yeah.
So they're not all thoughts
That's
that I
why
have
this is a
processed.
dialogue.
Yeah. I think also the story that comes before. I think that the commitment to social justice in my life, you know, from growing up in dictatorship and being in a world that already have found so much injustice, I was already awakened to this idea that part of what I'm here in the world to do is to fight for justice and to fight for a better world. So I think that experiencing this instead, you're right, it could have taken me to a place of a lot of hatred. It could have taken me to a place of, you know, I'm going to kill them all, I'm going to hate them all. I'm going to now, politically, which happens to a lot of people, go to a place of hating those who are not like me, those who want to kill me, those who want to kill the Jews. And I went to the opposite place. I think it's a combination, again, of where we came from, the values. I think I did hear, and I still hear in a way, a voice that says, perhaps the simplest teaching, hatred brings more hatred. That will never solve anything. All what we can do is try to change the world, systemic change. You know, it's like all the things that we talk about. So I was not going to bring my mom back in any way. Hating or focusing on trying to demonize the enemy was not going to bring my mom back. All it was going to do for me is bring me down. They were going to win even more because I was going to be dead from inside. And in that way, from an activist point of view, I have become more and more all these years active in reaching out to the one that is different, to the one that I might not agree with, that our narratives might be different. And the years that I lived in Israel, and now that I just came back from a few months there, actively involved around things that are connected to peace with the Palestinians. In my work in Boston, reaching out to the Muslim community and saying, I'm a victim of terrorism that came from a place of anti-Semitism, that people that define themselves as you know, terrorists that want to kill the Jews did. And I am reaching out to you, and I want to talk about this. So it's, I don't know where it came from, again, maybe because it was already deep in my upbringing and in my values, in my prayer life, which was always there, and I think in those years it became even stronger. I found, from a spiritual point of view, a lot of comfort in God. It never occurred to me to blame God. It was clear to me if I had to blame somebody, it was humanity. And not a specific human being, but humanity for making this world as I don't want to say bad words, as it is now. And then my responsibility as a citizen of the world, of what I can do.
So if we choose not the path of hatred and division and name calling, all that is happening that we have in this moment, and we choose the path of justice, not justice, of compassion, that's my question, you know, of compassion, let's bring the issue of justice, because we are 24 years later, and the criminals, because the people who did this are criminals.
Yes. And it's very important to say that choosing a path of compassion, a path of peace activism and dialogue, etc., doesn't mean that those who are criminals.
That's what I want to go there. So how do we claim justice from that perspective? Come a little bit closer, and afraid you will go out of the image. Okay. So how do we? How do we do tzedek tzedek tirdov? Justice, justice you shall pursue, but not from a place of vengeance, not from a place of me or you, but also from that place of compassion, but at the same time, compassion in one hand and justice in the other.
So I think there are different in the sense that those who did this should pay for what they did. Asking for justice is a commitment to a world where these things don't happen anymore. Unfortunately, 24 years later, we have nothing in Argentina. Something that doesn't surprise us, knowing the history of this country.
And Nisman was killed.
Yes. Honestly, I have lost hope that they will find. I often ask myself, how would I feel when I know that the person or the people who are captured. I don't know if we'll check. I don't know. We'll talk about that when it happens. I do find myself losing hope very often, and then a reminder that losing hope is not an option. I've
Why
lost
not?
Because losing hope, it's giving up to this world. And now my not losing hope doesn't come in the form of being very involved in the specific case of the AMIA. Actually, I made a choice of not being fully involved in many levels. The first year that I still lived in Argentina, I went every Monday to the Department of Justice, where people will stand there at 9:54 at the time of the bombing and call tzedek tzedek tirdov, justicia justicia perseguirás, justice justice you should pursue, and there will be speakers and a shofar blast. And I just remember a moment where, and this doesn't come with any judgment to those who did continue doing this kind of work, came a moment, it's like, this will not take me to a good place. Something about who I am, my personality, my psyche, I don't know. I needed to move, and I physically moved from Argentina. I went to Israel, and then here I needed to move and look forward and do different things. Getting into the details of the politics of Argentina was too painful for me, and at the same time I felt it would take me away from the kind of healing I wanted to work on. So I've been working on this for many years, for 24 years, on healing the wounds, and some of them will never heal. But I knew that that wasn't for me. And I know for other families of victims, including people in my family, that does help. So it's human beings cope differently. People often forward me articles they read about it, and I usually know less than other people. I follow the basics, and that's been a choice I've made. That's for the therapy interview, not for the rabbinic one.
Claudia, just something that we were talking before we started with this dialogue. We live in very, very difficult times, very scary times. I don't want to get very political here, but there is a lot of divisions, hatred, intolerance. I would say the heart of democracy is bleeding.
Yeah.
We have racist, misogynist, running the show, and so it's very difficult not to become a cynic and to lose hope. So I want you to pay attention to the subject of resilience. I think one of the teachings of Tisha B'Av, this holiday of Tisha B'Av, is one of the most incredible qualities of the Jewish people, resilience. And we just were persecuted and abused and this, and then here we are, creative and, kicking after 4,000 years.
Yeah.
So...
That should be a bumper sticker, kicking after 4,000 years. I like that.
So what that experience, it's a little bit on touching what we said before, but now applying it to the situation in general. Yeah. What this has taught you to confront the moment that we're at?
I think it's again what we have said before. I think that when there's so much hatred in our face now with what's going on in this country and in the world, and my own experience of losing my mother because of hatred exists in the world reminds me that hatred is not an option and that we have to fight it. Now I want to say something about the Jewish calendar, which is so meaningful. Tisha B'Av, as you said, is this weekend, and then the 15th of Av is next weekend, 6 days later, which is the day we commemorate love. And I always love the fact that our calendar is just genius. That goes from Tisha B'Av to the 15th of Av, from the saddest day of the year to the year that represents potential of love, of hope, of beauty. Now, personally, it's kind of, the way that my life has unfolded. My birthday is very soon. It's always around, it's in August, but it's always around Tisha B'Av. My bat mitzvah was just a few days after my mother died. Was the anniversary of my bat mitzvah. The 18th of July and Tisha B'Av, they're always between 5 days to 3 weeks around. I got married on the 15th of Av. So for me, always July and August are like, it's a roller coaster of emotions, from the darkest moments, days of my life, to the happiest moments of my life, and lots of celebration. And I think that that's kind of the reminder that we, 4,000 years and kicking, we just keep going. The resilience is what keeps us going, and that always after Tisha B'Av comes love and hope, and to get there we have to work so hard. Like, it's not that after destruction it's rebuilt by itself. We need to go out and rebuild it, and I feel very committed. And in my daily life, every time I look at my beautiful daughters, I'm like, okay, this is why we're doing this, because of them, for our children. It's a commitment to life. It's not giving up for them, for my children, for our children, for the future.
Claudia, Moreno Rabbeinu, teacher, friend, kind of daughter.
He always makes me cry, by the way.
I love you, and I loved your mom very much.
She loved you very much.
I learned from her. She opened the sacred language for me, and I have many memories of Shabbat dinners, of songs, of bringing your father down when he was flying with a kite somewhere there, and just bringing him down with a little love and sense of humor. She was a tzaddiket. She was a pious woman, full of compassion and full of love. So just want to say, may her memory be for a blessing, and may the teachings that you're drawing from this experience be an inspiration to all of us. Amen. Thank you. I want to say thank you for those who have been with us and those who will be with us looking at this.